As we've said, we are also celebrating Youth Sunday. We had our camp this week. It was amazing. You saw the videos and the testimonies. We had a wonderful week. But this is a part of our Talking About My Generation series, where we're talking about these different generations and just what they're like and how can we maybe have a message to them. And so this morning, my message is going to kind of be to the youth, and they're going to hear a little bit of similar things to what they heard at camp. But I also want to say that this message that is super appropriate to youth is also appropriate to everybody in this room. And so I want to take the same things we challenge our students with and challenge you guys with it this morning. I got to thinking about this sort of juxtaposition of being a teenager and being a dad. And one of the things that most stood out to me as a pivotal dad and teenage moment is learning how to drive. How many of you guys learned how to drive from your dad? Good bit of us, a lot of us. It's kind of a typical dad thing. I learned how to drive from my dad, and then I got to be a dad and be on the other end of that. And I can tell you which one is scarier. It is way scarier being the dad and having to hand the keys over to your child. And, you're trying to not, put too much pressure, but also, like, if you mess this up, we die. And so it's a very scary thing. My daughter will tell you, me and her had a lot of trauma around her learning how to drive. It was rough. There were days when I was like, well, you know what? We're just going to take a break from you trying to learn how to drive. We're going to take like 6 weeks off. We'll revisit this later. I can't do this. My heart rate cannot do this. And there was no disagreement. She did not fight me. She was like, yes, let's not do this. There was a time where we were like, maybe you just walk. Maybe you just walk, right? This is too scary. But eventually we knew that we couldn't do that. I knew that I couldn't let my daughter grow up to be somebody who couldn't be independent and get her own self around. And she knew that she didn't want to grow up to be somebody that was constantly relying on somebody else for a ride. And so we had to push through the fear and the difficulty. We had to find a way around it until she could drive so that she could be the person that she feels called to be, that God has called her to be, so that she could be functional and be independent. And so I'm happy to say she is today. We got there. She learned to drive. We're okay now. But it was genuinely difficult to push through that, but we had to, because that was part of how she would become the person she was trying to become. And so this is kind of the idea of this message. I titled it Driver's License. It's after a song by Olivia Rodrigo, and the song itself has nothing to do with, it's just the title. You can go listen to the song if you want to. Maybe listen to the clean version. But the concept is that driver's license moment, when you actually get that card with your picture on your face on the picture, that means I now get to get behind the wheel of a car and go out on roads and be in charge of my life. It's a pivotal moment. And I want us to have a moment like that this morning. I want you to walk out of this service feeling like you have the driver's license for your life. James chapter 3, verse 4, it says this: look at the ships also. Though they are so large and are driven by strong winds, they are guided by a very small rudder wherever the will of the pilot directs. Now, in context, James is talking about your tongue and the words that we say and the power that our words have to direct our life. But this analogy that James is making about how a pilot has the ability, by adjusting the rudder on a ship, to direct the whole ship whichever way he wants to go. And I want to talk to you this morning about the idea of being the pilot of your life, being the person that determines what you're doing with your life, making intentional choices and taking control of who you are, because you have a responsibility to God as well as to the people around you, your family, the people that care about you. You have a responsibility to God and to your community, your family, to become the person that God's called you to be. And that responsibility, no matter how old you are, the responsibility of you to become the person that God has called you to be is fully with you. And so that's what we're going to talk about this morning. Point number 1 in your notes is assume responsibility for yourself. I think there's a growing trend today, and I see it among young people, but honestly, I see it among not young people as well, to think that it's somebody else's job for my life to go the way it needs to go. And that's not an idea that we want to talk about. So Galatians chapter 6, verse 5, the verse is there in your notes. I actually want to step back and read a little bit more of the context of that verse. In Galatians chapter 6, Paul starts out this way: "Brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. Keep watch on yourself, lest you too be tempted. Bear one another's burdens." Hear that word, bear one another's burdens, "and so fulfill the law of Christ. For if anyone thinks he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. But let each one test his own work, and then his reason to boast will be in himself alone and not in his neighbor. For each one will have to bear his own load." I really wanted to just contrast two of those verses in that section. Bear one another's burdens, and each one will have to bear his own load. In Greek as in English, the two words there for burden and load are different. They mean different things. So we are told to bear one another's burden, and that word burden in Greek is bare, and it means a heavy thing, an oppressive weight, a difficult thing to carry. And so we are called on, as the community of God's people, to see our brothers and sisters bearing something they cannot bear and to help them with it. Sometimes you have a weight that you have to bear that you cannot carry, and you need the community around you to come around you and help. And that's part of what we're called to do as a church, is to come around and help people bear the burdens that they cannot bear on their own. And then there's this other word. The word is phordion in Greek, the word that is translated load, and it just means sort of any weight. Not necessarily heavy, just any weight, anything that you might have to carry would be a phordion. And what Paul means by distinguishing these two things is that you have times in your life when things happen, when you have a weight placed on your shoulders that's too heavy for you to bear, and you need your community to come around you and help you bear that. And you also have things that are simply your job, that are simply your responsibility. And you need to be able to do those things so that you have space in your life, so that you have functionality to do the other things and to help people when they're overburdened. Getting a driver's license is kind of just one of those things that, like, you gotta do it so that you can function. And you're gonna have to learn the things and practice and get somebody to teach you. And there are certain things that you've got to carry. But this is really, really important. Every person in this room has a calling on their life that God has put on you to say, this is your job. And I don't know what that is for you, but I know that God has a purpose for you. I know that God has a load, if we can use that, a job, a function, a thing that you're supposed to be doing. And you have a responsibility to do it, for each will have to bear his own load. I am not a Patriots fan, but I do respect that they won 6 Super Bowls on the mantra, the motto of do your job. They said, look, we've got a whole team of people, and everybody's got their own job, and if everybody does their job, we will win these games. And they won 6 Super Bowls on that concept. It's a good concept. And we could adopt that for ourselves. Everybody in this room, do your job. There's a calling on your life, and you're supposed to do it. Nobody else is supposed to do the job that God has put on your life. Somebody once said, it was Andy Stanley, and we were at a conference, and he once said about fathering, and for him as a pastor, pastors often feel a responsibility to do all the things in ministry. And Andy Stanley said, if you don't preach this Sunday morning, somebody else will. If you don't lead that Bible study, talk to that person, somebody else will. But if you don't parent your child, nobody else will. That's your responsibility as a pastor. And that idea that there are some things in your life that if you don't do them, no one else will. There's something like that for you. There's something God has called you to do that if you don't do it, it just won't get done. So think about that as we talk through these things. What is it that God has put on your heart and in your life that won't get done if you don't do it? So assume responsibility for yourself. Each one will have to bear his own load. Romans 14:12. So then, each of us will give an account of himself to God. And here in Romans 14, he's talking about kind of different controversies and, should we do this? Is that a sin? Is it not a sin? And there's debatable things. And Paul makes this point. He says, each person stands or falls before his own master. You worry about you, is Paul's basic message in that context. When he says this, so that each one of us will give an account of himself to God. It's not meant to be this scary judgment, you might go to hell. It's not that. Your eternal destiny is determined by your faith in Jesus. But you are, for sure, responsible to God for what you have done with the things that he placed in your life. The gifts you were given, the opportunities you were given, the access you were given, the things that God has called upon you to do, you're responsible for doing something with those gifts. And you can be held accountable for what you have done with what God has put in your life. So take that responsibility seriously. Each one of us will give an account of himself to God. So assume responsibility for yourself. Number 2, assume responsibility for your faith. We try to drill this into the students, but every one of us could bear to hear this message. You will not end up in heaven because your grandmother believed in Jesus. You will not end up in heaven because your mom or dad believed in Jesus. You will bear the responsibility for what you believed and for how you lived your faith. And so it's so important to make your faith your own. One of the seminars that one of our young adults taught at camp this week was called Not Your Mama's Faith. And that's the whole idea, is that this is your faith. You're responsible for it. You're responsible for what you believe. You're responsible for learning what you believe. Ephesians chapter 4. Once again, I'm going to back up just a little bit from where your notes start out. In Ephesians chapter 4, I'm going to start in verse 11. It says, and he gave the apostles, the prophets, the evangelists, the shepherds, and the teachers to equip the saints for the work of ministry, for the building up of Christ. That's the part that's not yet on your notes. And I backed up because I want you to see the context. Paul tells us that God gave gifts. He gave all these different things, these spiritual gifts, and said, you are to use them in the church. You are to use them for all these things, for the building up of the church. And so in the same way, you have been given gifts that are meant to be used for building up the church. And listen to where we go with all the people, when everybody is using their gifts, until we all attain to the unity of the faith and of the knowledge of the Son of God, to mature manhood, to the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ, so that what? So that we may be no longer children, tossed to and fro and tossed to and fro by the waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness and deceitful schemes. This concept of a ship being blown by all kinds of waves, we know that that's real, that the world, just living in this world, you'll have every storm and every distraction and every misinformation and every controversy thrown at you, and it will be difficult to maintain a course and keep moving in the right direction. And the way that you overcome that, the way that you continue moving in the right direction and maintaining your course, is to be a part of this community where everybody is using their gifts, and for you to ensure your knowledge of Jesus and your knowledge of His Word. This is how you navigate the crazy storms that come. And so it's so important for each person, for themselves, to spend time in God's Word, to think about it and talk about it and ask about it and study it, so that you know for yourself what is right and what is wrong. Nobody can do that for you. No pastor on this stage can decide what you believe. We can do our best to tell you the truth and give you guidance, but you have to decide if you truly believe it and are truly going to make it a part of your life and a part of your practice. You have to do that. So often, we try to outsource our beliefs and our faith and our theology and let other people tell us what to think and how to live. But at the end of the day, once again, you will give an account to God for what you did with His Word and with His truth. You will bear responsibility. And so you won't be able to stand before God and say, but I saw this TikTok video that said this. Or, but this television pastor said that. Or even my own pastor told me this. You will be accountable for what you invested, for what you did, for what you believed. And so you are responsible for your own faith. James chapter 1. Again, using this analogy about storms on the sea. He says this, but let him ask in faith. He's talking about asking for wisdom, which would be a part of the taking responsibility for my faith, would be to ask God for wisdom, ask God for guidance. But he says this, when you do it, let him ask in faith with no doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. Unstable in everything. Nobody wants to be that. Nobody wants to be unstable in all their ways. We want to be the person that when the wind comes and the waves crash, we stay on course. And so you have to know for sure, deep down in your soul, what you believe and who you are. So many people are letting other people tell them what they believe and who they are. And if you're that person, if seeing a different video on social media tomorrow would shift who you are, then anything can shift who you are. And if anything can shift who you are, then you're never going to be able to accomplish anything. You're really never going to be able to accomplish anything unless you know who you are and what you believe. It's so important to figure that out. He tells you to ask in faith with no doubting. Because a prayer that is, hey God, maybe, kind of, if you're real, if you're out there, if you know anything, could you tell me some things? If that's your prayer, then how is God going to build you up from just a baseless nothing? You got to come in with some faith, with some confidence. And the way that you build that faith is by investing time in prayer, in the Word, and in community, and taking that responsibility for your beliefs. So assume responsibility for yourself, assume responsibility for your faith, and number 3, assume God's direction is best. Assume God's direction is best. I've talked to you a lot so far about you taking responsibility, and that's accurate. You are responsible. But that doesn't mean that we go, oh, God says this, I'm going to go this way because I'm making my own choices. I'm the captain of my own ship, and I'm going to go wherever I want to. You can do that. You'll pay a price. You can explore. You can go outside of what God has called you to do and who God has called you to be. There will be a price for doing that. God is not mocked. And so within that, taking the responsibility for my own self and for my own beliefs, be warned that there are dangers. You can direct your own ship right into a storm, right into a reef, right into something dangerous if you don't listen to the guidance that is out there. And so we try to teach the youth the best that we can to think for themselves, make this faith your own, but also be available to listen to guidance. There's a balance in that takes wisdom to figure out when you listen and when you don't. But when it comes to God's word, it should always be that we listen. This word has been around for 2,000 years, and it's been guiding Christians for all of those 2,000 years. And if you look at what Christians have done in the last 2,000 years, every single time we've done really bad things, it's when we got away from the instructions. God has given us timeless instructions that will help us to be wise, to live good and valuable and abundant lives if we'll listen. And that's what we talked about with our youth all week was, yes, on night 1, we presented the gospel. And so quickly, let's talk through that today. What is the gospel? The good news, the good advice, the correct direction for your ship is that Jesus Christ came and died on the cross and paid for your sin so that you could have the opportunity to place your faith in Jesus and spend an eternity in heaven with God. And that's the first and most important decision that you make. But once you make that, now you have to decide what kind of life you're going to live. Is your life going to be of value? Are you going to do things that are worth doing and impact the world around you? And that is what I believe Jesus meant when he talked about the abundant life. So when we decide to do that, we have to ask, what does that look like? And so now I'm going to give you pretty much the exact same challenge that we gave our students at camp. You've been coming here and you're here in this service, and we love that you're here. We love ministering to you. Our worship team loves to be able to lead you in worship. Our speaking team, we all love to be able to share God's word with you. Our greeters love to be able to greet you with a smile on their face. From the moment you walk into this room until you leave, you are being ministered to, and we appreciate the privilege of ministering to you. But you know what we would love even more? Is to minister with you. We would love for you to be on our team. Christianity wasn't meant to be a spectator sport. When you're here, we want you to be a part of what we're doing. There's so many ways to get involved. You could go on the app right now, and there's a list right on the main screen that says needs, ministry service needs. You can click on one of those, find a ministry. We need people to run cameras. We need people to sit with children. We need people to change diapers. We need people to mentor youth. We need people to go out and share food with homeless people that are struggling. We need people to do all kinds of things. And my goodness, how much work could we do if everybody in this room took it on as a responsibility to do your part in our ministry and minister with us. And so I want you to consider that as we close out this service. What would that look like for you? We want you to take on the idea of being a minister. And so we challenged the students with that this week. I'm challenging you with that now. Who would you minister to? Who in your life needs ministry? Who has a need that you could help them with? Who are you going to minister to? And the second question is this: who are you going to minister with? Who can you get to say, hey, come along with me. Let's go to the out team and distribute food and clothing to people that need it. Let's you and I go and contact the children's ministry and see where we can serve at VBS or something. Take on this responsibility and bring somebody with you. Who are you going to minister to? Who are you going to minister with? And with that, I'm going to pray, and we'll wrap up this part of the service. God, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to be in this room, to worship, to be blessed by the testimonies we've heard from students. I pray that all of us as a church would take on this responsibility to be ministers, that we would minister with one another, that we would find places to plug in and to serve, so that this whole church becomes a ministry team that reaches our community for you. I pray these things in your name.